with Sonia Choquette up there to play flute for Sonia's workshop there. And we went to a reception at your house. And I was delighted to meet Ingrid, and we right away connected on the near-death because she'd had a near-death experience. And we kept in touch over the years, and she invited me to attend one of her workshops that she gives for people with life-threatening terminal illness and their caregivers and family and friends. And I went to Minneapolis for a weekend with her and enjoyed that very much. And she's just a wonderful person. She had her near-death experience early in her life, and she's basically devoted her life to her family and to service in her community. So please give a warm welcome to Ingrid Dilley.
So it's 4 or 5 and I am till 5. 4 Okay.
Just get myself.
In time here. How long I got? Okay. So
Wait a minute, one more thing. Conference contributions, we didn't send a letter, but if somebody wants to contribute something to the conference, we're going to pass the basket. So this would go directly towards supporting something in the conference. If you want, it can be a few dollars, it can be a few $100s, we'll take whatever. We're not at all picky. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
hi. All right. I had my near-death experience back in 1967, way before it was popular to have a near-death experience, or anybody ever knew anything about a near-death experience. I just want to give you an experience. I actually want you to feel this vibrationally in your body. I'm going to ring a Tibetan bell, and I want you to feel for where you feel that vibration in your body. Now, how many of you felt it in your body? Yeah, pretty much everybody. Most people feel it either in your head or your heart chakra. Anybody anywhere else?
The arms.
Uh-huh. Often people feel it where they have illness as well. It's kind of like the energy goes, like you were saying when you were having healing, it goes where it's needed. And I've had people in my group, I use it when I do my Renewing Life group because I've had people, be very skeptical about alternative complementary medicine or even some of the indigenous cultures kind of healings. And I think that when you've had a healing, you know it's possible. And I've had people who just from that bell have had relief from pain or from, side effects from chemo or from surgery for cancer for days just from hearing that bell. So I myself have had a number of healings and been gifted with that. I'll tell you along the way, I've thought, I must be retarded at a metaphysical level because I keep attracting these life-threatening conditions to myself. And I said that one time to a medical intuitive that I was consulting with, and she said, I don't tell this to very many people, but she said, I myself have had about 20 of them. And I said, oh my God, I'm doing much better than you. And so she said, when you're very sensitive, you often attract these things as kind of watermark experiences that wake you up and move you through something quickly. So I, of course, didn't know that at 18. I originally had thyroid cancer when I was 16. I had a reoccurrence at 18 that was very serious because it had spread to my lymph glands. And And then I had also reoccurrences when I was 20 and 23. And I had a spontaneous remission at 23. And then I had another life-threatening tumor removed at 31. So I've lived in these kinds of circumstances quite a long time. Then at 47, I had viral encephalitis in Mexico where there was no medical care, and recovered from that without any brain damage or nerve damage, which I guess is also very miraculous. And then just a month ago, I had some skin cancer removed from the radiation I had from my original cancer back in my early days. So, you know, the saga continues here. When I was 18, and I had the first reoccurrence, I had what's called radical neck surgery, which is pretty radical surgery. And I came through the surgery okay, but then I kept telling the medical personnel around as I woke up that I couldn't breathe. And everybody said it was just because I had a pressure bandage that was draining my wound and like that. And, you know, I didn't complain, I guess, as much as I would now. But at any rate, sometime later in the afternoon, the doctor came in to check on me before he was leaving for the day, and I had no pulse. And I had a blood clot on my trachea. And I was like, you know, a breath away from being dead. And he sliced me open in bed and tried to give me a trachea right there on the spot. And the blood clot was in the wrong place and he couldn't do it. So they rushed me off into the operating room. And I remember watching it like a scene out of the air on television right now. You know, you get the whole team and they're all yelling and screaming and they're throwing the instruments and, you know, like that. Yeah, well, that's what it was like. And I'm like, why are they so crazed? I mean, I'm just fine. And then I realized I was watching them. Now, you know, you have to get, I had no clue there were out-of-body experiences. I had never heard of a near-death experience. I had never heard of a spiritual awakening experience. I wasn't even religious. So, you know, I was watching them, and I looked down and I could see me, and I thought, no, this isn't really happening. So I started really looking around. And the more I looked around, I thought, you know, this is really looking like I'm up here. And then I remember I looked back down, and there was an operating room light hanging from the ceiling, and, you know, so I could see the back of it, and it had dust on the back of the operating room light, and I thought, oh my God, I am up here, you know. And so as soon as I had that sort of panic emotion, that moment of realizing I was conscious, I mean, this is your worst nightmare, being conscious out of your body, right? And floating around up there. And so as soon as I had that panic emotion, there was this little whoosh sound, and I was in the tunnel of light. I completely forgot about being on the ceiling. And I was totally taken care of in that, you know, from then on. I had a guide on my left side. I never saw what he looked like, but he talked to me throughout the whole thing. And I guess I would say that I was in the presence of universal knowledge, because throughout the whole tunnel, I'm going, oh, now I get it. I mean, I would ask these questions, like your mind just goes like normal in life, and there were always answers. I mean, I totally understood everything that had ever happened, what was going on in my life, why, everything. And so I would just remember over and over again, I would go, oh, now I get it. Oh, now I get it, you know? And then, just like in the movies, scenes from your life go before you. And the only moments that stood out for me were very simple moments of unconditional love. They were these simple moments in which I had been with another person in a really heartfelt way. They hadn't been big, important moments. They had just been moments in which, you know, I'd been very kind or just unconditionally good. And there weren't very many. I mean, I had not been brought up to be that kind of person. I wasn't spontaneously that kind of person. And so what I began to notice was that all the moments of my life passed before me, that they had all been opportunities to love. that I'd only used 2% maybe for the right purpose. I missed the point in at least 98% of the possibilities. And so no one else was saying this to me. This was my realization as I was watching my life review. So I get to the end of the tunnel, and there's all these people welcoming me. I mean, like, they're thrilled I'm there, and there's a threshold between me and the people. And they're like, you know, like calling me by name and welcoming me and like very happy I'm there. And I remember meeting an uncle that had died in World War II several years before I was born. And I recognized him immediately. He had been kind of an important member of our family because he had been such an influential person in the family in that he had been so kind and so creative. And he had only lived to be about 28, but people in the family still talked about him all the time, and although I had never known him, he lived in their hearts so clearly. And so he was there and welcoming me, and he was like really happy I was there, and then I didn't recognize some people, and I was introduced. This was like my great-grandmother, this was my great-great-grandmother, this was my great-great-aunt, and they were dressed in the native costumes, because I'm third generation, all my grandparents were immigrants, and they were all dressed in their native costumes, so anyways, I'm going to just step into this. I mean, I still have no clue this is about death, you know, so I'm like just going to go into this. I mean, they're all happy I'm there, and as soon as I get to the threshold, my guide says, "Stop," really loud. I mean, I just remember being sort of jarred and stopping immediately. The other way. Okay. And so I stopped, and as soon as I stopped, he said, "Now this is what death is, and it's okay if you go there. You can go there and you can rest, but you'll have to come back in another lifetime, and your lessons will be as unconscious as they have been up until now in this lifetime. Or you can choose to go back into this lifetime knowing your lessons." So I said, "Well, I'm not doing this again." And I'm like back in my body, you know, there's this little whoosh, and I'm like squeezed into my body now. And they're still operating on me. So I was not given any anesthetic. I mean, like, I'm now in my body, they're operating on me, and all of a sudden I hear in the background, "Her blood pressure is going up." Like, you know, this is a big revelation. So then they realized I was back. So they still were very afraid to give me any anesthetic because I was so close to death. I mean, this is a long time ago. They weren't so good with meds. And so they did the rest of the removing the blood clots with just locals, you know, shooting locals in. And so my near-death experience is, from what I understand, really a full-blown near-death experience that's pretty authentic because I haven't forgotten anything, because I was never given any drugs at all. And so, you know, I clearly remember all of this stuff. So then, I have to tell you that, you know, I get back in the room, and this is all, I'm like in this very sterile cancer hospital in New York City. And this is like in the 1960s. This is like hard medicine. I know enough not to say any of this stuff out loud. I mean, for sure, they would have shot me up with Haldol and off to the psychiatric unit. There was no listening for this. So I was smart enough not to say anything. But, you know, I really felt like something pretty dramatic had happened to me, and I had no language to talk about it, and I was really very apprehensive to say it to anyone. So the very next day, I had this other experience that, well, I guess before I go on to that, I want to say that the two things that I really knew when I came out of that near-death experience were two things. That all of everything that happens in your life are all opportunities to love. And they're all opportunities to shift what was fear and doubt in your life into love and trust. I knew that. And that every person, every situation, everything that happens to you is an opportunity to love. And the second one that I saw, and I've seen this in the near-death experience, was that one heart, or the way in which you live, affects generations and generations and generations in front of you of how you live your life. So, you know, in our culture, we often talk about how dysfunction gets passed on in families. Well, so does wisdom and love. So it's like lights up hearts for generations in the way in which you touch and live your life. So I absolutely knew those two things when I left the near-death tunnel, you know. So in coming back, I think I had a pretty hard re-entry because of the way medicine was. I mean, it just really was not an environment in which, I mean, this happened before Kubler-Ross put out, you know, death and dying information. There was nothing about death and dying. There was nothing about near death. There was nothing about spirituality in hospitals. And so I kept quiet, but I knew I'd been touched by God. I mean, I knew that. I knew that it was no accident that I was alive. I knew that I had lessons to learn. I knew that I wouldn't die of cancer anytime soon because I hadn't completed my lessons. I knew that there was reincarnation. Never thought about that before. I knew that I had soul lessons that I hadn't completed. I didn't know how to live with an open heart. I didn't have any tools. I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know how to live soul lessons of love in my life. I didn't know any of that, but I knew the lessons. In the real world, I was very sick. I weighed about 80 pounds. I was partially paralyzed. I was very weak, and I really was not expected to survive long term. So here I am in this really, you know, high-tech hospital and terrible terrible cancer unit. So I want to give you this as an example of the problems of integrating a near-death experience upon reentry, because this happened the very next day. So the next day I'm in bed. I'm ready to have some food, and they bring in the food, and then you have to have somebody else wheel you up, and then the whole deal. So I'm still kind of nauseated from the anesthetic, and so they wheeled me up, and I started eating, and I got sick and threw up, and all over myself. And so I call the nurses, the call button, and they come in and they check on me, and they say, they'll call my nurse's aide. So nobody comes. So the food person comes back in. No, she can't lower my bed. So she takes the food, and then I call somebody. They lower the bed. Now they're not going to clean me up either. It's the nurse's aide thing, and so this goes on. So I keep calling, and no one responds. They keep saying they're going to call the nurse's aide. So now it's an hour and a half later. I've been laying in my vomit for an hour and a half. Now I pull the red cord, which you pull when you can't breathe. All the doctors, all the nurses, all the equipment, everybody shows up now. This is like the blue card in the hospital. Everybody shows up. So now my doctor is really mad at me because, I have done the sin of trying to get some help here. And so what happened was he started lecturing me how bad this was, and I should never do this, and what a waste of his time it is, and da-da-da-da. So for the first time in my life, I had this voice. Oh my gosh. I'd really been taught to be very compliant and a good patient, and expect, I think back then, you really thought doctors were kind of all-knowing too, and I sort of treated them like that. Anyways, all of a sudden I had this voice, and I told him that I was not one of their dying patients, and that I wanted to be treated like I was alive. I wanted to be called by my name, not the interesting patient. I wanted to be cleaned up right now, not when it was convenient for them. That there were 5 nurses out in the hallway at the nurses' station the whole time I'd laid in my vomit, and they were all giggling and laughing and talking at their station, and no one had attended to me. And that I wanted to be treated like I was alive, not dying, and that I expected the nurses to do more than give me meds. So he goes out and starts yelling at them and gets it handled, and the nurse's aide comes about 20 minutes later. She's a nun. So now she starts in, and she is the most methodical, robotic person I've ever met. Starts, folding the sheets and changing the bed. I mean, this took her about a half an hour to make a bed. So I'm meanwhile over in the chair, passing out here from pain and being exhausted. So I started swearing at her to get her ass moving, So now, everybody thinks I am like the craziest person. You don't swear at a nun, now for sure I'm going to hell. Okay, so now so I finally get in bed, and I'm okay. It's 2:30 in the afternoon. Oh God, it's only 2:30 in the afternoon. And I started thinking about what had happened. What had just happened. And as I was, thinking about it, I was really very proud of myself because I had said all those things, and I really felt it, and I felt like kind of vindictive and right about it, And then I had this other knowledge that I had done all this damage to these other souls, these other people who were the nurses and the doctors and all these people who were my fellow souls on their path of healing. And I had not left love in their hearts. I had done damage. I had not progressed on my soul path. And meanwhile, I'm going, soul path? What is a soul path? What about my body and soul here, And so I had this whole sort of internal dialogue going on between me because I certainly didn't have this information integrated in me. But I seemed to have all of this all-knowing information that was just within me, And it's too close? All right. So just tell me, raise your hand or something when I'm doing it wrong, and I will. Okay. So I clearly knew I had not progressed on my soul path. Man, so I said, so what am I talking about? What is a soul path? And, what do I know about souls? And I had all this vindictiveness about the way they had treated me, and I was glad I said all those things. And then I felt terribly guilty that I had said all those things. And I remembered this phrase that you are to use every encounter with every person in every situation to love. Well, I clearly failed that lesson, And so I had all of this information and no tools. And I say this because it took me years and years to integrate this information in a usable way in life. It was incredibly difficult. I didn't even know how to talk about this stuff. My family wasn't even religious. There was nobody to speak this into, except when I got home. I lived in Wisconsin. When I got home from New York City, my grandmother on my father's side called me up and said, I want you to come over, which was very unusual. She never had asked me to do that. And I get over there, and she had sent my grandfather away, so it was just the two of us. And she said, I know something happened to you when you were in New York. I sensed it. And I prayed you back. And I want to know what happened. And so I said, well, something did happen. And I told her the whole story. And this was her son who had died in World War II that met me. And then the people I described as my great-grandmother and my great-great-grandmother were people that she thought she recognized them. I said, well, do you have pictures of them? Because I had never seen pictures of them. She said, yeah, I think so. So she digs in this big drawer of pictures and finds this picture with about 8 people on it. And I said, yeah, it's that one and that one. And she said, yes, that's who it was. And so she said, these are the people in our lineage who are all awakened souls. These are all of the people in our lineage who are spiritually awakened. And she said, and you have to get in our family, no one else is. It only happens to one person in each generation. And I was like, so she said, so you know you're it, right? This generation. It was very good that I had that because it really validated the whole experience to me. Because she died a month and a half later. And I never really got to be mentored by her. I mean, I think it would have been a huge difference had I had the mentoring from her, because I had no spiritual environment to process it. Which, is what Kenneth Ring says about near-death experiences, that it takes an average of 7 years to integrate a near-death experience in your life. Most people will not talk about it for about 7 years afterwards. And I think that many, many more people could integrate it much faster if they were given some coaching and structure and support, like IANS does, right. and a safe place to process it in. Because it's pretty scary to speak it into the world. A lot of people really think you're wacko, and especially in a family that's not spiritual, at all. And so it was 7 years after my near-death experience. I went to a grand rounds in which Dr. Stanislav Grof was presenting. Now, some of you may know who that is. He's a psychiatrist who has now studied human consciousness for about 50 years. But back in the early 70s, he was doing some really interesting research with Timothy Leary on LSD and taking terminal cancer patients through the steps of death and dying to acceptance, using low doses of LSD to process them through those stages so that they would get to acceptance before they died. So this was very controversial stuff. And he was presenting in a grand round with a bunch of psychiatrists and psychologists. And so I'm listening to him talk about near-death experiences as a spiritual awakening experience that is available in every culture in the world. Not only through near-death, but that there are rituals in which people are processed through the equivalent of a near-death experience. So he starts talking about like the Native Americans, that they used to like hang by their pectoral muscles, and then they go and they experience altered states of consciousness, and then they'd go on their vision quest and just about starve themselves. And then they would come back and they would hear the voices and be the medicine men of the tribe, or the wise men of the tribe. And then he talked about how in Christianity, originally baptism was being submerged underwater and having a drowning experience and being resuscitated so that you were reborn into the light. Well, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Except, obviously they must have lost a few along the way. Change that ritual to a little brimble of water over you. So, anyways, that was also very helpful to me, because by this time I was like back in communication with my spirit guide and hearing voices and like getting a lot of information, and that was very helpful to my life. But I wasn't too willing to share that with too many people either, because this was like in the era when transcendental meditation was just coming out. So I thought what I was doing was must be like meditating, right? Why would you meditate if you didn't get answers? So that's what I thought for many years. I was just meditating. And then my brother told me one time that most people don't get answers. Yeah. So he said, what you're doing is channeling. And so then I for sure didn't tell anybody for a long time about that. And, but I mean, from what I've read from the research, now most people who have had near-death experiences, especially a full-blown near-death experience, do come back with these gifts or these experiences in which you have other abilities. And, you know, most people change dramatically in their spirituality. I never had any need to go to church ever again. I mean, I go if, you know, somebody's getting married or whatever. I don't have anything against religion. I just find it kind of ritualistic. And I have a very strong spiritual path, but it's, you know, it's basically a private path. I have a small spiritual group in which I channel and they channel, and, you know, we've grown over the years. I would say that my spiritual beliefs are very universal. That I think all religion is based on the mystical awakening experience, and then it's ritualized, and then it's forgotten. The mystical part is forgotten, and then it seems to end up to be the rituals. And so I don't find that satisfying. That also seems to be very common with near-death experiences, that they're in touch with spirit guides, and they use them, and they have a very active spiritual path. That love is the big lesson. They no longer have fear of death. I had no fear of death after it. I mean, I continued to have cancer for another 5 years. And I was like absolutely clear I wasn't dying of it anytime soon. And, you know, I had these reoccurrences in which, like, they were for sure, I mean, I should never have survived. Never. And then I had a spontaneous remission when I was 23. And the doctors, after having treated me in 4 major medical institutions for 7 years, said to me, well, I guess we must have misdiagnosed you. So I thought I was the only one that had ever happened to. And then when I was 31, I had an inoperable tumor, and the surgeon invented the surgery to make it happen, and it worked. And I was fine. I ended up with a lot of nerve damage, but I was the most successful one of these surgeries that had ever happened. There were only 60 of these kinds of tumors ever recorded in medical history. I mean, I had these kinds of things happen to me. So then I was really led to do Renewing Life. In my meditations, my channeling, I just kept getting this prompting that I had to develop this program. And finally I just said to my spirit guide, look, you have to take this chronic pain away or I'm not doing it. I can't do both. I can't cope with the pain and do this. You take the pain away, I'll create the program. 3 weeks later, this healer shows up in my life, and in 3 treatments, the pain is gone for life. So then I said, oh shit, now I gotta do this. So then I just kept kind of looking for somebody like Bernie Siegel. Can I just, like glom onto his coattails and do it? No luck. Nobody in Wisconsin like that. In fact, the University of Wisconsin hospitals is really very sterile and academic, and they do all this research and everything, not very emotional at all. And I mean, they finally developed a complementary medicine center last year. So this was like 17 years ago I'm talking about. So I created this program, which is now, it was endorsed by the Comprehensive Cancer Center there, and it's covered by the HMOs, and it's in 9 states, and it happens, all over, and people have dramatic and remarkable shifts in both their emotions and their physical well-being in doing this program. And I have professionals come up to me all the time and say, how did you do this? This is like an impossible thing that you created, because many people before me tried to do it. UW Hospital is a huge institution, and it's loaded with all these people with all these degrees after their names, and I'm some lowly occupational therapist, And I know it was because I was guided. I mean, I was given information about the room I was going to end up doing it in, and sure enough, there we were in that room, which is the most beautiful room in the whole hospital, overlooking the lake, you know, and that was the room I got. So those are the kinds of things that happen pretty regularly to me, which I guess in other people's lives are considered incredible synchronicities and amazing things. But I mean, then I developed other psychic abilities besides this. I now do psychic readings pretty regularly with people, but for a long time it was more subtle. I had a number of after-death experiences with my mother after she died. My mother was really a non-believer. I never told her about my near-death experience until she was dying, because she was like, this would have not been okay with her. And she really still didn't believe it even then, and was very afraid of dying. And I did it to try and ease her fear of dying, and it didn't seem to make any impact with her at all. So I didn't think it had done any good. So after she died, I got home, and she died in another city, which was about 2 hours away from where I live. And I got home, and there was this whole stack of mail, you know, that I had to go through because I had been gone for a while. And there were 3 letters for Esther Nelson, which is my mother's maiden name. I keep getting these letters out of this pile for Esther Nelson. Never before, never since. The last one says, Esther Nelson in care of Barbara Roloff, who was one of our neighbors. So I go over to Barbara Roloff and I say, do you know an Esther Nelson? And she said, yeah, that's my mother. She lives in a nursing home. I said, why am I getting her mail? She said, I don't know. And she had never gotten mail for her before. So, you know, this was my mother just like saying, you know, I got over to the other side. Just wanted you to know. Never before, never since have I gotten a letter from Esther Nelson, you know. So I got that one from her. So then, 3 days after my mom's funeral, my brother, who had flown in from California with his family, is back in California, and he calls me, and his son had just had breakfast and came out of his room and said to him, Dad, Grandma just visited me. She was an angel. And he said, then this giant angel came that was as big as the whole ceiling in my bedroom. And then the big angel left, the giant angel left, and then Grandma left. And my brother said, well, that's a nice dream, Mikey. And Mikey said, Dad, it wasn't a dream. I was wide awake. And so my brother calls me up and says, what do I say to him? You know? And I said, well, this is a wonderful thing. I mean, you know, that this gives him a little closure about the whole thing. So I'm telling my aunt about this, who lives in Wisconsin, and she calls the next day to her sister, my other aunt, who lives in Florida. And this aunt in Florida is kind of a religious fanatic. So she's telling her the story about Mikey and the giant angel, you know. And my aunt says to her, my aunt in Florida says to her, well, this is the rest of the story. She said, about a month and a half ago, when Esther had her heart attack and we all knew she wasn't going to make it, I prayed to God, and I said, you know, she's going to need an angel to help her with her transition. And she will need a giant angel because she doesn't believe. So she said, yesterday I was praying to God, and I said, you know, I know you probably sent the angel and everything. I'd just like a little verification. And my aunt calls with the story about the giant angel. Now, Mikey, who lives in California, and my Aunt Ro, who lives in Florida, have never met each other. I mean, this is my dad's sister and my dad's grandson, and they've never met each other. And these are the two that relate this story. So, I mean, you know, these wonderful synchronicities, and there was one other one that really seemed to heal my sister as well. So it seemed to me that when my mom felt like all the significant people in her life had been taken care of and eased, then she stopped visiting us anymore, and it was okay, you know. So those kinds of things regularly happen to me, and I guess I don't consider those all that strange or weird. You know, over Christmas I wanted to do this special project for my son, and frame his Eagle badges and all this. He's a professional, and I just thought this would be really nice for his office. And he, of course, thought it was kind of corny, and it was his mother's good idea. So I wanted to find his Eagle stuff in the basement, and he lives in his own house, and it's all, you know, his basement's a mess. And so I go down there, and I just said to my guides, okay, you know, I just need to be led where this is, because I don't have a lot of time here. We need to find it. And so I go to the first box, and those are all the certificates, and I find it right away. And I said, yeah, this is part of it, but I want the medals. So now I'm, you know, I go to where my son says he thinks it is. No, none of that. So then I go to where my intuition says it should be, which is all toys from his childhood. And I'm digging in the bottom of this bag, and out pops the medals. So, I mean, these are the kinds of things that I think when you have spirit guides, you regularly use them all the time for things. My husband has great directions, you know, and I'm terrible at directions. I get lost all the time. So when it's really cloudy and he's gotten lost somewhere because he loves to take back roads and all that, then he looks at me and he goes, you know, I have no clue where we are. And so then I go, okay, you got to go about 3 miles up here and take a left, and then it'll be about a mile, and then we'll hit a highway. And then he can find our way home from the highway, you know. And he always thinks this is hysterical because I have no sense of direction. I could be going exactly the opposite direction. But he believes me enough to, you know, I mean, he never questions this when I do this. Like, another time we were in Las Vegas, and we were in a hotel. And this was, you know, you guys probably all remember there was that terrible fire in Las Vegas. This was like about 2 years before that, though. There had never been a big fire in Las Vegas. So we're in this hotel, and I wake him up at 2 in the morning, and I said, there's going to be a fire in this hotel, and we have got to look right now where the exits are, because they're different than where the elevators are, and we're not going to be able to find our way out if we don't, because it'll be so smoky. He goes, we gotta go right now? I said, yeah, right now. So 2 o'clock in the morning, we go looking for the exits, you know. Okay, so we found the stairs, everything. I said, okay, now we can go back to bed. So we're there for another 3 days, nothing happens. We get home 3 days later, there's a fire in that hotel, exactly the way I said. See, now this is the other thing. In that state, there's no timeline. It's not like it works like in this time. So you pick up stuff, but you don't know when, you know. And so it's not like you can just pull it up on cue. And so it's not like it's a sideshow, or, you know, like you can count on it. But I really do listen to my hits of intuition, because when I really get something that really hits me, I know that I have to listen to that it's being given to me for my protection or whatever. You know, I've had hits like not to go on that airplane, and, you know, the wing bursts, the fuel tank on that plane bursts, you know, 45 minutes out. And so I'm just giving you a few of these kind of strange stories so you have a sense of how hard it is to integrate this stuff. When we moved into our other house, as soon as we got in that house, I said, after we moved in, I said, there's a ghost in this house. And my husband's like, yeah, what does that mean for living here? And I said, well, I don't know, but I gotta get rid of this ghost. I don't like it. She keeps hanging out in our bedroom and in the living room. I don't like it. He says, there's no ghost. I don't feel anything. Everything's fine. And I said, no, there's a ghost. So I just had this little conversation with the ghost one night. And I telepathically, you know, asked her why she was there. And she said, well, this is my house. And I said, no, we bought this house. This is our house. She said, no, this is my house. I built it. I said, oh, so why are you still here? And she said, because no one takes care of it like I take care, like I love it. And I said, that's true. It was a rental property for 2 years. And I said, that's true. But we're a family, and we bought it, and we're going to fix it up, and we love it, and it's fine. She said, I'm not leaving. So I said, do you know you're dead? And she said, no. And I said, so, I got it that you're watching out for the house, but you really need to know that you are dead and it's time for you to go rest, in the light. And she said, no, I need to watch my house. And I said, okay, so you can watch the house, and when you get that it's loved and it's taken care of, then you need to go to the light because it's time to rest. So she hung off for about 3 more months, and then she went to the light, and it was fine, and So my husband thought, yeah. So then, 3 years later, I meet our neighbor on the corner who bought her house from her parents. So she's like in her 60s. So she's lived in this neighborhood for years and years. So I said, so do you know who built my house? She said, oh yeah, that's Mrs. Ring. And she goes into the whole story. And I had asked all this other information about the ghost. And then the ghost had told me that she lived there, and her husband had gotten killed in World War II, and she had these 3 kids, and the rooms they lived in, and all these things like that. And so I asked the neighbor about this Mrs. Ring, and she told me all the same information. And I, of course, had told my husband all this stuff about the ghost 2 years before. And so, it's kind of nice to get verification.
Yeah.
It makes you feel a little less crazy that you're picking up this stuff. And I, of course, have, my own very strong spiritual guides. And one of the gifts that I seem to have developed, or that I seem to have from the other side, is that whatever I read, I can pick up what's really true. And I can pick things up from many different resources and see the wholeness, or how it all fits together. And so when I teach workshops on different topics and things, people always tell me that I make it so practical and that they can understand it, and it's so simple, and that for the first time they understand their soul path, or the meaning of it, and how to work with it. So that seems to be something that I have been able to do, and most of the things that I teach are really personal empowerment classes that help integrate people at emotional and physical and spiritual levels, so that they live more vibrantly in their life and less in resistance. So I think that's probably most of what I want to say, and then you guys can just ask questions. If you have questions, I'd be glad to answer anything. Yeah?
When you talked about the threshold when you're having your near-death experience, did you visibly see it, or you just felt it, or the...
No, I saw it. She asked about the threshold in the near-death experience, if I actually saw it. You see things a little differently there, but I experienced it definitely as a change. Just like this floor is wood to carpet, I experienced it as that side was different than where I was. Yeah, I did. Yes?
You mentioned that you can affect future generations by how open your own heart is.
Yes.
What if you don't have children?
It doesn't matter. It's every person and every situation and every moment that you come in contact with. She was asking if you don't have children, do you still affect future generations? And yes, you do, because every person that you touch, in the way you leave you in their hearts. And so very much you affect not only their day, but how they then affect people in the future. Because we all know, when we have been around people who have really mentored us to trust the world and to be more loving, we become more loving and open and trusting individuals. Not just with that person, but more in our lives. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Along that same theme, love to me means really compassion and kindness.
Yeah.
But there are times with people that you need to practice what's been called tough love, and I think that gets misunderstood because people, sometimes think that means rough and tough love.
Right.
Repeat the question.
I will. So she said that love, she interprets as compassion and wisdom, and that sometimes when you communicate with people, you have to give them tough love. You aren't just a doormat. And then was there more to it?
Yeah, and I was asking if that was looked upon, you know, in your life review as something positive, that you had the strength, you know, to draw that line and do it was really in that other person's highest and best interest, even if it wasn't all sugar-coated kind of love.
Okay, so she's asking if, in a life review, if that would be looked at as a positive thing to give somebody tough love, as opposed to negative because on the outside it didn't look very loving. This is what I have to say about it. That peace at any price looks like peace out here. Doesn't feel peaceful in your heart, right? But peace of mind feels good in here, but doesn't always look peaceful out here. You see, it might mean you have to stand up for yourself and be assertive. It might mean you have to set personal boundaries. And so, you're in the quotient. It's not just being loving to other people. You have to be loving to yourself, too. You're not out of the quotient. And usually people who come back from a near-death experience, that's the last one they get. Or I'm saying the last one, this is as far as I've gotten and so far. But you learn not to do damage out here. But you, the last one you stop doing damage to is yourself, because very often you don't have the tools to be able to be assertive and yet do it with an open heart. And one of the best techniques for this is attitudinal healing. Because attitudinal healing allows you to say your truth in a way that lowers the fear level in the other person. So you are able to say your absolute truth, but in a way that doesn't raise their fear level and have them close up their heart. The only way to do that, though, is that you have to lower your fear level first, so that you can be an extension of love and not a call for help. So, attitudinal healing is a very positive tool for healing the heart space between people. Yes?
When you came back, this may sound like a funny question, but the first time you saw yourself like in a mirror, did you have a reaction like, who the heck is that?
No, I didn't look. Well, I looked really bad.
I did too, and I know I didn't look great, but it took a few weeks. I would like literally just stare at the mirror. I'm like, the only thing I really recognized was my own eyes. Everything else was kind of foreign.
Uh-huh. I don't remember that. I don't remember, oh, the question. After I had my near-death experience and I looked in the mirror, did I look different or to me or whatever? I don't remember that. I don't remember feeling like I looked different. I felt different on the inside, and I remember my eyes were really important. I saw them as more windows to the soul, in myself and others. And in fact, before I started channeling regularly, I found that I could hear messages if I looked in my eyes in the mirror. That was one of the first ways I connected with my spirit guide. Okay, how about back there?
You mentioned a phrase when you were talking about every moment being an opportunity to love, but you never told us the phrase.
Okay, the question is, I was told that everything is an opportunity to love. Every experience, in my near-death experience, I was shown in my life review that everything is an opportunity to love. And so the way that I look at it now is that every person I come in contact with, it is no accident. When something happens in my life, none of this is an accident. All of this is being given from Spirit to help me grow more into my wholeness. So I may not like it, but that person or that situation is in my life to teach me something about love and trust. So this is what I do. I go along in life pretty much with my heart open. When I notice my heart goes, what we do as human beings is we look out here how to fix them. Let's get rid of that person in our life, let's divorce them, and move on, or change jobs, or, or else we try to make them wrong or gossip about them and disempower them. That's what we're thrown to do as a human being. On a spiritual path, what you learn to do is notice that your heart is closed off. And you say to yourself, what do I need to heal in me? So I could be right here, right now, in this situation with that person and be an open heart. That's what I need to heal in me. That's my soul lesson. That's where I'm not vibrating in my soul's vibration of love and trust. So every time I'm feeling fear and doubt, it's my soul lesson that's gotten reactivated and opened up. And it's all my work. And when I heal that place in me, then I can be with you however you are. And I don't take it on as me. I can then have compassion for you and just see you're an upset and you're blaming and shaming and whatever you're doing, and it's your stuff. And I can have compassion instead of taking it on and getting all strung out about it, you see? So does that answer it?
I thought you said there's a phrase that you use.
Well, the phrase that I use is that, the one I just shared. The other one is that the big lesson is, with every person, in every situation, in each moment, how to be loving with that person. That's the big lesson. You got to stay conscious that that's the purpose, that people are appearing in your life. And when you come from that, then you interpret every opportunity as an opportunity to love, not fear. Love, not hate. Love, not gossip. Love, not disempower. Love, not compete. You see? So I'm hoping that works. That's the only thing I can come up with. Okay. Yes, you.
I just wanted to tell you that you're a wonderful speaker, and your message is just beautiful. I love it. I love every word of it. And I have two questions. One is, how do you get this attitudinal healing? How do we go? Is there a book? Is there a class, or what? The other one is, if a person has cancer, should they go through all the medical procedures, or should they just let it be and take its course?
Okay, her two questions were, how do you get attitudinal healing, and if you have cancer, what should you do? Should you do the regular medical course, or should you just let it wait for healing? So attitudinal healing was developed out of the Course of Miracles. It's based on those principles. It was developed by Dr. Jerry Jampolsky in Tiburon, California, although I think he might be in Sausalito now. He has written numerous books, Dr. Jerry Jampolsky, and they're attitudinal healing. So I also teach attitudinal healing in Renewing Life, and in a number of my other, like my chakra workshop, because I think it's a really important healing technique for the third and the fifth chakra in terms of communicating your needs and wants without shaming and blaming. So I teach it as well. I don't know if it's available like the Course in Miracles is, but it's based on those same principles, only it's not religious, it's spiritual instead of being religious. Okay, now in terms of cancer, I would never tell anybody what they should do. I'm not the doctor. But I think that what I did is everything. And I always did what I intuitively felt was right for me. So there have been times when I have not chosen all of what the doctors wanted to do. And I have always used other things as well. I have always used what we now call integrative medicine or complementary medicine. And I have always used my spirit guides. So I think that you change the odds as soon as you do something else besides what medicine offers. So if medicine has a 50-50 chance of curing what you got, and you do, you know, nutrition and complementary medicine kinds of things like acupuncture, and you do renewing life to change your emotional impact of this and the way in which you look at your life and the way in which you're able to deal with your energy in your life, you change the odds dramatically in your favor.
But why should you fight to live? Why not just let it take its natural course?
So the question is, why should you fight to live? Because most of us are invested in wanting to be with the people we love and continue our lives. And at the same time, if it's your time, it's also okay to let go. So, you know, when I had encephalitis, I was floating out there in the other realms for quite a while with the angels. And I knew I was really sick. And I said to my spirit guides, you know, it's really okay if I die. But if I'm going to live, you got to start telling me right now what to do, because I don't want to be brain damaged and, you know, and crippled from this. And then they told me specifically what to do. And I did that, and I was okay. And of course, my doctor was like, when I got back to the United States, how did you know to do that? And I said, well, I asked my spirit guides. And he like kind of goes, yeah. And then he said, well, you did exactly the right thing in those primitive conditions. You could not have done it better. And what's very interesting is, you know, my doctor is like a pretty traditional doctor, although he lets me do a lot of what I think I need to do for myself. But he's pretty good. And he's a really good doctor, which is why I go to him. And, because, you know, like if I have an infection, you know, I can do healing on it, but I can also, you know, use Western medicine. And so anyways, this guy has really, over the course of having me, shifted a lot. And he rarely questions me now if I want to do something a little different. For example, I'm projected to have osteoporosis in 20 years because I have no thyroid gland and I've taken all the right things, but your thyroid gland controls your calcium in your body and and like that. My bones are okay now, but 20 years from now they're not supposed to be. So, you know, he put me on a bone density med, which I tried and I got really sick from. And then he wanted me to be on another bone density med. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. But I said, I read this report that if you jump for 50 times a day, it's as good as taking a bone density med. It's a report that was a research thing that was done in Canada. He said, so this is what you want to do, jump? I said, yeah, this is what I want to do. And I said, and I want to have, you know, a bone scan now, and I want to have a bone scan when you think I need a bone scan again to check and see if this is working. So he said, okay, so I'll let you do this for 2 years. And then we're going to have a bone scan, and we're going to see if this works. I said, okay, that's what I want to do. So that's what I've been doing. And so, you know, last year I had my bone scan, no loss. I'm like holding my own.
So show us the jumping.
You jump just like a jump rope. It's like a jump rope kind of jumping. It's, I don't use a rope, but it's just like this. The important part is you have to jump on your heels, and obviously you can't jump like that, but you have to jump. You have to jump like a jump rope jumping, so you hit your heels like that.
And that stops, that helps, it stops it.
It stopped it. It stopped, yeah, it's osteoporosis completely, yes. Yeah. Okay, over here. Yeah, in the red.
Can you speak to self-healing methodologies and so on? Can you speak to prayer about, say, world peace?
Yeah.
Relate?
Absolutely, sure. I really think that we're each healing agents in the world, and that the work you do on yourself is reflected all around you. And then it goes like in wider and wider, you know, ripples around you. And so it's very important for each of us to do our own work, because as we heal our own hearts and we are able to live in love and peace, the people that we bring up, our children, and the interactions we have with other children, and the interactions we have with our fellow neighbors and co-workers and all that, I mean, that affects our environment, that affects our world. And those are parents that are bringing up their children. Those are parents, those are people that may or may not have other important roles in life. They may have a brother who's a president. Who knows? I mean, you know what I mean? These are, you are like that ad that was for AT&T a number of years ago. You are only 7 people removed from anybody? What's it called? 7 degrees from anyone. You know? You're only 7 degrees from anyone in the world. And I really believe that. I mean, I remember when that came out, we were watching TV and my daughter said to me, my daughter was like a teenager then, and she said to me, Mom, you know, I just saw that thing about what's Prince Harry on television, and he's pretty cute. Who do you know who knows that? Who knows them? 7 degrees, you know? So I said, I don't think I know anybody. And about a half an hour later I said, I know someone who knows them. We're only 1 degree away. I mean, you know? And it's true. I mean, if you think about the world like that, it matters how you live your life and how you treat the people around you and what you leave in their hearts of you. That's what you can do every single day for world peace. Yeah.
You mentioned that you met some relatives you've never met.
Right.
In the other side.
Right.
And you also mentioned that you met a guy.
Yeah.
Did the guy have any type of dress or garment, costume?
Yeah.
Can you describe that versus perhaps what you saw with your relatives?
Right. Well, in the tunnel of light, I didn't see him, I only heard him. But I came to see him after a while because I reconnected with him. And he wears a loincloth, and he doesn't wear any clothes on the top. And his head is kind of high and wound up like that. and he sits on a tiger rug. And, you know, I've come to understand that he's Hindu.
Like a guru.
Yes. And so about, this was now about maybe 10 years after I had my near-death experience. I was visiting my brother in San Francisco, and I had decided to take S. I don't know if any of you remember this. It was transformational work in the early 70s. It was called Earhart Seminars Training. It was one of the first transformational workshops. So I decided to take this. It was 2 weekends, and you had a week in between, and it was only taught out in California, so I took it out there, and I stayed with my brother over the week. And my brother and I are only a year apart, but we've never lived together after he left for college. So I hadn't seen him basically in 10 years, you know? So he had just had his appendix out, and I can heal people since my near-death experience. So I said, you know, I'll do some healing on you, because he was still in pain. I mean, he was home from the hospital, he was still in pain. So I did this healing on him. He said, you know, how do you know to do this? Because I, of course, had never told him either about my near-death experience. So I go into the whole thing and I tell him all this stuff. And I was probably a little more open because I had done 1 weekend of S so far, you know? So I'm like trusting a little more than the real world out there. So anyways, so he's kind of like wide-eyed, you know, about this whole thing. And he says, so you need to meet Baba Muktananda. And I said, Baba who and Anna Wana? You know? I mean, this is 1970s in San Francisco's flowers in your hair and love beads, you know? I figured it was some local yoko. So he said, no, you got to meet Baba Muktananda. And I said, you know, I really don't want to. He said, no, I mean, you really have to meet him. So I said, all right, I'll go because you want me to go. So we get there. And, I mean, Baba Muktananda had hundreds of thousands of followers in the world. I didn't know this, and he happened to love my brother. And we had this little private session with him. And so I'm talking, so we get in there, and Baba Muktananda doesn't speak English. So now we have an interpreter, and, you know, Okay, so we do this whole thing, and Baba asks the questions and the whole thing, and the interpreter, and I'm telling him about what I'm still calling meditations, but is channeling. And every once in a while, Baba's eyes would get kind of big, and he'd go, "This is very good," and then it would be interpreted to me. And so, after about 20 minutes of this, Baba says that I need to go over to the other side of the room with him. So I go over the other side of the room. My brother is in the same room with me. I guess I should say this. Baba Muktananda, the interpreter, me and my brother are all in the room. So Baba Muktananda and I go over to the side of the room. We're probably like 10 feet away. And Baba puts his arm around me like this, so my head is on his shoulder, so I can't really see his mouth and his face. And he starts telling me all this stuff about that he knows who my spirit guide is. It's Lord Shiva. And that this is all in his lineage. And that this is like a really an amazing thing to have had this kind of spiritual awakening experience, and to know that love and light is the big lesson, and that, I have a guru within me. I don't really need to be around a guru anymore. And that this can be my last lifetime, and that I gotta keep meditating and like all this stuff, Okay, so I get done with this, and we get up, and I'm leaving, and I'm telling my brother all this stuff that Baba Muktananda told me, kind of in a little whisper over there, And my brother looks at me and goes, "Look, I was in the room the whole time. He never said any of those things, besides which he doesn't speak English." So I said, "Didn't you hear me talking too?" He said, "No. It was all telepathic for 20 minutes about." Yeah, I mean, so that happened when I was about 25. I don't know. I mean, these kind of strange experiences happen to you, And so I used to be, I still am pretty careful who I say those things to. I mean, it really discredits you professionally in hospitals to be kind of woo-woo-y like that, And it took me really a long time to come out and say that I channel for people. I mean, I am the #1 most resistant psychic, And I had a spiritual reading a couple of years ago from kind of a famous psychic, and she said, "You're supposed to be channeling for people." And I said, "No, I don't want to do that." She said, "I'm not telling you gotta like it. That's what you're supposed to be doing for a living." I said, "No, I don't want to do that." She said, "I'm not telling you that you want to do it. You're supposed to be doing it." So I said, "Okay, if I'm supposed to be doing it, then I have to do it different than the way I've been doing it in the past," because I always felt like in the past when I would give people this information, then they would want me to stay like their conduit between the spirit realm and them, and they wouldn't develop their own spirit path. And that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be empowering people to have their own spirit path and to get in touch, and that each of us have it all. It's not just me, And so, so she gave me a few tips on how to do it differently, and and she told me how much I'm supposed to charge, because I'm like really bad with money in terms of my value. And so anyways, I said, "So can I start with just my friends, like people I know, because I really am uncomfortable about just putting myself out there." She said, "Okay, just do this for a while, but within 6 months you are to be doing this professionally." So I said, "Okay." So I did, and I'm like really good at it. So there you have it. All right, I'm going to do this side because we haven't done this side.
I'd just like to say that for all the people that come here, for the people that haven't had experiences, I would say don't worry about it, because the people who've had the experiences here, mine was very frightening in '94. It took me 6 years to find these people, but by my research and by my own opinion, a lot of people don't make it. They just commit suicide. And that's why Irons is a beautiful place, because we have a place that you're not insane. Angels are biological realities. They are watching us. We are not supposed to see these things. We're supposed to live our lives But that's why Irons is a beautiful place.
Yeah, so this wasn't a question, this was just an endorsement for IONS, how wonderful it is to have an organization like this where you can process these kinds of really strange psychic experiences and not feel like you're crazy and weird, you know? Yeah, okay, in the blue shirt.
I was wondering if you could tell us more about your program that you have in the hospitals, and I'm specifically interested because my father's been recently diagnosed with terminal cancer, and I know how much more is available.
Right.
And there's no listening. I mean, even what I've helped my dog cure cancer, and it's all too woo-woo and, you know.
Right. No, see, one of the real blessings, I think, from my lineage is that my parents wouldn't let me be woo-wooey, you know. I mean, they are like really grounded, and nobody else in the family was awakened, you know. Everybody else that was the other generations were dead by the time I had mine, so I was the only one. And so I have both sides of my brain really well developed. And so when I teach this kind of stuff, I'm very grounded and practical about it. And I will be glad to have that conversation with you, but I don't think everybody in the group is interested in how to work with people with life-threatening illnesses and stuff. And I'll be glad to give you the information. I brought some information in about the 3-day program and everything, and your father could come and you could come to it. Okay.
A thought occurred to me when he raised the question about world peace, and what came to my mind was someone asked Mother Teresa, how world peace? And she said, go home and love your family.
That's
Yes.
right.
The comment over here was Mother Teresa said about world peace, go home and love your family. And that's exactly right. Peace is created by each person being peaceful in their own heart. And then the way in which you live your life is a reflection of that. And the reflection you leave in everyone else's heart that you interact with is then peace. Yes?
You mentioned that you know that there's God, and I was just wondering if God is your source and center for your spirit and love.
The source, well, my spirit guide is Lord Shiva. And there is a universal source that is all of everything. And I don't necessarily use the word God, although God is a good word for it. But God is also a sting word for a lot of people. Like that just turns them away because they went to Catholic school, you know? And so I've really you learned not to use the traditional language of religion so much, because for many people it closes the door before it got opened. But yeah, there's a universal source. Yep. Yeah.
Will you be teaching any lectures on the attitudinal behavior soon? Do you teach in this area?
The question was, am I going to be teaching attitudinal healing anytime soon? I'm not scheduled to, and I would be glad to if, you know, we want to create something here through IONS. I'd be glad to bring it and do a weekend course on it. Yeah. Or even a day course. I mean, I can do a great day course on it, and that you would walk away with a lot. Yeah. Okay, you again.
Resisted telling this, but Dr. O. Carl Simon said we all get cancer about 2,000 times in our life. And the natural healing energies and forces of the body just automatically take care of it,
Right.
unless we get in the way of it. But I asked my higher self, I've been a professional hypnotist, for a breakthrough in healing, and came up with a procedure while the cancer patient is in the hypnotic state of having the subconscious put a blood purifying system in the cancer patient's body, and it's been successful with bone marrow cancer and with leukemia, but it's necessary. It'll come back if you don't get to the root cause of it.
Right.
So in a spiritual orientation, teaching the person about their higher self and how they can get in touch with those healing energies and turn them on, the natural healing energies of the body, it's incredibly successful.
Great. So this was a hypnotist telling someone his process of working with cancer patients. That's been very successful. Okay, anybody else have anything? Yeah.
In your early years, how did you discern the difference between your spirit guide or your spiritual wise voice and just your mind?
Because it was different information than my mind. My mind was almost always fearful and kind of critical, and my spirit guide was always loving and trusting. It was absolutely different energy. You could feel it in your body. The mind always is about defending the heart. It's the first line of defense, to be out there and say the right things or get the right, answer or like that. And it always comes from fear and doubt. It's led by fear and doubt. But the spirit is always led by love and trust. It's a different vibration in your body, and it's very close to the vibration of the Tibetan bell. Yes?
Ingrid, I have a real problem. Maybe you can help me out. How do you have compassion and love for people who murder, abuse children, kidnap, torture, and all these horrible things? I try to love them. There's no way I can do this. I hate them.
Yeah. How can you have compassion for people who are murderers and abuse children and all those kinds of things? As a human being, I can't.
That's right.
As a spiritual being, I see these people as very disconnected from their soul path, from their heart path, and that they are lost souls. I know that when they have their life review, it will be very, very painful, and I know that they will be saved in the life and taught all they need to know. And when they have another lifetime, they will get to practice some more and love and trust.
They have to pay their debt first.
Well, I don't believe in a lot of that. But you get punished.
The presence of God within them and love that, and that'll transform them.
Yes, the presence of God and love inside can transform them. Yes, I mean, certainly there are people who have been transformed who previously were murderers or abusers, and we've all heard these stories and seen them, that you can have a spiritual awakening. And in fact, every person who has ever had a near-death experience, no matter what kind of a jerk they were before they had it, shift and become much less ego-driven, much less competitive, more loving, and more compassionate and more of service in the world. That's the shift that happens in the heart. And the heart becomes the heart of wisdom, which is a different heart space than the heart of the human heart. The human heart is often filled with pain and aloneness. The spirit heart alone is filled with love and compassion. But when the two heart energies combine and blossom and intermingle together, they form the wisdom heart and become the gateway to all higher knowing. And then the balance of the human personality can begin to happen. That's the chakra workshop I teach. Okay, I think we're really overrunning, so I'm going to do one more question and that's it.
How do you recommend that you listen to your inner voice better? Because sometimes I feel like this lady said here, how do you know when it's you talking or your guides talking? Because lately I have been feeling like my guides have been talking to me, like when I lost my 3-year-old son one time, and I didn't know I lost him until 20 minutes later, and then something inside my head just told me to go back where I started from, and I just raced back and I found him.
Right. So how do you know the difference between your spiritual voice and your mind? Right. And how do you tune yourself better to listen to your inner voice? You have to make a practice and an intention of connecting. And you have to practice keeping your heart open, because your heart is the gateway to all higher spiritual development. You cannot live a spiritual life and develop that with a closed heart.
So when you say keep your heart open, they say don't judge people, don't.
I'm saying literally, you feel the heart energy open. And when your heart clutches shut, this is a lesson for you to learn. About you, not about fixing them. About you, what closed you, and then what opens you. If you feel it in your body. Your body never lies, your mind often does. Okay, I think we're going to close it up. I'm sorry, if you have other questions, feel free to come and ask after. Thank you.